50,000 years ago, people migrated to India from Africa. And they traveled across the mountains, the valleys, the coasts, the plateau. And they established themselves in different communities across the land. They lived in the forests, they lived in the deserts, they lived in the coasts, they lived next to ponds and rivers, and they established communities. And some of them exist even today. For thousands of years, they have existed in this land. We call them tribals or indigenous people. They are about 2,500 tribal communities across India. And each of these tribal community has its own way of expressing itself through art. So every tribal person that you see will have his own costume, his own tattoos, his own artwork painted on the walls of his house or her house, painted in pottery or on cloth or on leather, toys and votive offerings. These artistic forms, very unique to them, establish their identity. So imagine a country like India has over 2,500 vocabularies to explain 2,500 communities. But do we have access to them? A museum like this will enable you to access these people's lives through their art. You'll get access to their mind, to their past, to their present, to their future. Because that's what art does. Art communicates the thoughts of a people. Tribal art communicates tribal thoughts. Folk arts communicate folk thoughts. And all this comes together to create a culture. When you see art forms, you must understand how they emerged. Why do humans create art? And tribal art helps us appreciate art in its most primal form. Because art establishes us as humans. Animals don't create art, humans do. And the earliest art forms are found in cave paintings. Earliest art forms are found in jewelry made by people who lived 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago. They created the gods using trees and rocks and wood and clay. It's the tribal people who figured out the earliest weapons and the earliest way to contain fire and the earliest ways in which to get metal out of rocks. And they created statues of the way they imagined the gods or demons or spirits who spoke to them through trees, through plants, through animals, through stars, through water bodies. And all this is captured in their art. So when you see tribal art and folk art, you see how people imagined the world. And for them, it is part of their life. It is not a decorative object to be bought in a market. It has to be created as part of festivals, rituals, childbirth, death, marriage, festivals, summer solstice, winter solstice, spring equinox, autumn equinox, the sowing season, the harvest season. And so we get an access to their lives of pre-literate societies. They didn't have script to tell their stories, and their songs are perhaps forgotten or not heard. But what we have is their visualization of their lives, their immediate lives, their mythical lives, their heroes, their villains, their tragedies, their comedies. Art helps us see the soul of people who we otherwise don't see. Now, of course, the world is changing. Tribal art is manifesting itself in modern art. People are painting on paper, on canvas. The same art can now be part of your drawing room. You can bring it to your house. Gond art, Varli art, Bhil art, Madhubani art. Things that were part of people's lives in their homes, in their kitchens, on their walls can now be part of your bungalow, your front room, your backyard. You can experience what it meant to be a person of that community, or how did they see the world. Not just Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci or Hussein, but artists from the Gond tribe who have made a name for themselves around the world, or from the Varli tribe, or from Madhubani art or Mithila, men and women who have now taken what was once considered part of religious ritual into the artistic aesthetic space and can be made part of our lives. So the folk and tribal arts give us access to a world which is very different from ours. These are our brothers and sisters who lived very differently, who decided to be part of nature as hunters, as foragers, who did not look at the world as we do today, commercially, commodifying everything. Perhaps these art forms saw life as sacred. These artworks were sacred. Take a glimpse of how to look at art differently in this section.
Across the globe, humankind has been spinning and sharing stories since the beginning of civilization. Before there was the television or the internet, storytelling was a very popular medium of entertainment. Usually after a hard day's work, people would gather around the storyteller as he spun tales about brave kings, beautiful queens, and magical beings. With time, these stories have taken on a variety of forms, from the humble orally transferred version to diversify into a range of creative mediums like music, dance, drama, and especially the visual arts. This is MAP's tribute to the incredible art of storytelling through some highlights from the museum's indigenous art collection. We start our journey from east of India in the state of West Bengal. In the Paschim Midnapur district of West Bengal lies the quaint little village of Noya. Otherwise ordinary looking and unexciting, it comes alive once every year in time of the annual Potto Mela. For the village of Noya is the hub of the Pattachitra art form of Bengal, and almost every resident here is a Patua Chitrakar. The Patuas are a group of storytellers who move from village to village, carrying their scrolls and performing in front of an audience. The scroll acting as a visual aid. Episodes from the story are painted within vertical registers, and the Patua rolls out the scroll bit by bit as the story progresses. This is the Manasa Mangal Pata, a story that pays homage to the Manasa, the snake goddess. The narrative spans the lives of Chand Saudagar, his son Lokhinder, and his daughter-in-law Behula. When Chand refuses to accept Manasa's divinity, she kills Lokhinder, and Behula is left a widow on her wedding night. Behula's devotion towards her husband, however, pleases the goddess, and Lokhinder is brought back to life. Chand Saudagar is humbled and becomes a devotee of Manasa. Bidding goodbye to the Bengali Patuas, we now move to the neighbouring state of Bihar and meet the Madhubani painters. Mithila or Madhubani painting was for the longest time an intimate art form confined to the inner chambers of an upper caste house, created only by Brahmin and Kshatriya women. An earthquake in 1934 led to the chance discovery of these paintings. Another natural disaster, this time a drought, changed this medium from ritualistic art to a means of livelihood. The drawings traveled from walls to paper, subjects changed from religious to everyday life, even as the skills transferred from upper caste women to everyone else. This work by Bauwa Devi, a pioneering artist of Madhubani, illustrates an episode from the legend of the Naga Kanya or the snake maiden. In the painting, two snakes assume a human form to fulfill the wishes of a woman they consider their sister, who wishes for a natal home. Next stop on our travels is the lush forests of Madhya Pradesh to meet the Gond artists. What is known popularly as Gond art is actually an art form that belongs to the Pradhans, a community living in the village called Patangarh. Traditionally musicians to the higher caste Gond patrons, the community is today celebrated for their unique painting style. This school of art was pioneered by Jangarh Singh Shyam, who invented the signature of using dots and dashes. Christian the Jangarh Kalam, the style was adopted by generations of artists from his village, each developing their unique style within the idiom. Jangarh also pioneered the representation of Gond Pradhan myths and deities in a visual format. Subjects that he explored ranged from everyday themes to traditional myths and supernatural figures, themes that the artists who came after him continue to practice and make popular. This is a painting by Jangarh of Kekramal. a mythical figure that combines a crab and an elephant and features in the Gond Pradhan origin myth. The story involves Bada Dev, the creator, a crow, a crab and an earthworm who together help shape the earth using clay from the underworld. The distinct Jangarh signature is visible in the outlines created using many small dots in a range of colors. To the south of Madhya Pradesh is the state of Maharashtra. This is where we now meet the Chitrakati artists who make pattern paintings. The pattern paintings, like the scrolls of Bengal, have a performative aspect. They act as visual aids to itinerant storytellers who travel from village to village narrating stories of the Ramayana and Mahabharata. The small group of bards set themselves up for village audiences, showing the paintings one by one while singing or reciting the narrative to which they belong. The recitation always begins with the invocation to Hanuman, for it is believed that Hanuman never tires from hearing Rama's name. He is always the first to arrive and the last to leave. The storytelling might end, but Ram Nam remains, having Hanuman as its eternal custodian. This image could be an episode from either of the two epics. A warrior on the right is seen with a bow and arrow pointed at a Rakshasa or demon twice his size. The ferocious aspect of the demon is made evident by the row of sharp teeth and a long red tongue. It seems to be already hit by numerous arrows, but all have failed to bring him down as he advances towards the warrior. The stylized, intensely colorful and immensely innovative image is a characteristic found in all pattern paintings. They're always made on coarse paper, sometimes on both sides of a single sheet, and are created as a series or set under the chosen theme. Now it is time to take a small detour towards the ancient shadow puppeteers of Andhra Pradesh who practice the art of Tholu Bommalata. In Telugu, Tholu is hide or leather and Bommalata means dance of the dolls. These puppets originally acted as props or accessories for storytelling performances by itinerant bards who moved across boundaries of India and beyond. The stories they narrated were Hindu epics, but at times they also included secular themes and even social commentary. Gleaming through the screen in night-long performances, these puppets would come to life through dialogue, movement and music, orchestrated by an entire team of puppeteers, usually belonging to a single family. This particular leather puppet is of Hanuman or Anjaneya, the monkey god that features prominently in the Hindu epic Ramayana. To account for shortened attention spans, shows that once went on for nights and nights are now condensed to an hour. Bright electrical lighting has replaced flickering earthen lamps, but the magical glow of the characters and their fantastical narratives still have the power to transport the audience. And finally, we dive deep down into the south and explore the masked men of Karnataka. In certain lesser-known pockets of southern Karnataka, an annual festival called the Bhuta Kola is the highlight of the calendar in the Tulu community. Bhuta Kola in the local dialect means play of the spirit. A very apt name because on those nights, forest spirits really come out to play. Men wear animal masks and are no longer mortal, but are possessed by the divine spirit. These spirits then sing and dance all night long and answer questions through the men who have received them. This is the Bhuta mask of Pili Chamundi. In Tulu, Pili is the word for tiger, and Pili Chamundi is worshipped for the protection of crops and cattle from tiger attacks. The bulging eyes, flaring nostrils and fangs are further indications of the spirit's ferocious and powerful nature. Storytelling as an artistic medium is inherently performative. Each of the traditions that were highlighted from MAP's indigenous collection hold no meaning without the right context or the accompanying performance, whether that be dance, music, theatre, or everything at once. In keeping with that spirit, here is a Yakshagana performance by Guru Bananje Sanjeeva Suvarna and the artists of Udupi Yakshagana Kendra, directed by Sharanya Ramprakash.
I was reading up on various forms of theatre that existed in South India. And for me, I'm from Karnataka, so Yakshagana was one such form. And so when I came here, it was performance season during the time that I came to visit and watch Yakshagana. and the whole coastal belt was alive with performances, which used to go on every night dawn to dusk. And the performances were so contemporary. It spoke of the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Dwapar Yuga and the Treta Yuga, the Satya Yuga, but they spoke of today's politics. They spoke directly to the people. It was for the people, by the people. Farmers perform this form. Village people watch it. It's completely supported by the community, the local community. So for me, here was a form that was vital and immediate and raw, and that's how I discovered it. So when I saw the artwork of Ravana, Jatayu and Sita, so here is Ravana, who is abducting Sita, who is the daughter of the earth, and two natural enemies, which is the bird and the snake, are both present in the painting, and they have put their differences aside to come to the aid of Sita. So this is a very, very folk narrative, a very folk perspective of a scene in Ramayana. And for me, it resonated very, very strongly with the kind of freedom that Yakshagana also employs. So to use the same Jatayu Moksha Prasanga, centering Sita as the daughter of the earth, to whom Jatayu, the bird, comes in time of her distress. Elevating her as the divine mother was worked very well, because Yakshagana also centers itself. It has many contradictions between folk and classical. It tries to define itself. So the artwork responds to this notion through my teacher, Guru Bananjay Singh Suvarna, and his vision of Jatayu Moksha.
Ravananu Sanyasi Veshava ಜಗವನು ಏನು ಬಂದರು ಬರಲಿ ಎನ್ನುತ್ತಾಜ್ಞೆಯೋ ಮೀರೆ ಏನು ಬಂದರು ಬರಲಿ ಎನ್ನುತ್ತಾಜ್ಞೆಯೋ ಮೀರಿ ಅವನಿಸುತ್ತೆ ನಡೆದಳು ದಾರವರ ತನಗೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿನಳೆಂದು ಲಕ್ಷ್ಮಣ ಚರಣವನು ಕಂಡರುಗುವನಗವು ರಾಮನ ಚರಣವನು ಕಂಡರುಗುವನಗವು ಮರಣ ಬರದಿರಲೆಂದು ಮರಣ ಬರದಿರಲೆಂದು ವರವನೀತಳು ಸೀತೆ ಕೊಂಡಂಬರದೆ ನಡೆದ
Linking collections around the world, Museums Without Borders is a unique digital collaboration between MAP and institutions in India and abroad. Each episode in this series juxtaposes an artwork from MAP with an object from a partner museum, exploring commonalities and differences in style, subject or narrative. In a time of restricted mobility, this initiative helps to build bridges between people, collections and institutions. Both Jangarh Shyam and Kenojuak Ashevak were pioneers in their own fields. Jangarh propelled the Goan Pardhan style of painting, while Kenojuak was considered a pioneer in the modern Inuit art space. This video examines their trajectories as artists, their unique style of painting, the subjects that enter their works, and the indelible impact they left on their respective fields. Each of their selected works feature a central bird figure, an owl by Ashevak from Risdi's collection and a majestic peacock by Shyam in MAP's collection.
Today we look at the connections between two works that both play with our perceptions of the natural world, creating something extraordinary out of the familiar. The links between these works extend beyond subject matter, illustrating how two pioneering indigenous artists, separated by years, continents, and cultural contexts, may nevertheless have shared a common aesthetic sensibility and approach.
I'm speaking from the Risdi Museum, formerly known as the Museum of Art at the Rhode Island School of Design, and situated on the ancestral territory of the Narragansett people. I want to acknowledge the many indigenous communities that have moved through this area over hundreds of generations as I speak about the celebrated Inuit artist Kenojuak Ashevak, who lived on Baffin Island between Greenland and the Canadian mainland. As I was looking through MAP's collection, I was struck by Jangarh Shyam's ingenious and joyful depictions of animals, and it reminded me of the work of many Inuit artists, but foremost among them, Kenojuak. In her magical owl of 1968, she depicts this wondrous creature standing erect, wings fully spread, looking out at the viewer with the large spherical eyes that are so typical of this species. The many-fingered crown tipped in red is a liberty taken by the artist to perhaps suggest the special significance of the owl.
On this side of the Atlantic, Jangarh Shyam takes a similar license with the vibrant, multi-hued crown of his peacock. Born in Madhya Pradesh to the Pardhan community, traditionally bards who kept the mythologies and genealogies of the region alive through their storytelling and music, Jangarh Singh Shyam is one of India's best-known folk and tribal artists. He is celebrated for innovating a new artistic idiom named after him as the Jangarh Kalam, and for inaugurating the Pardhan Gond School of Painting. The peacock, painted by Jangarh sometime around 1990, features a majestic bird with open wings. It showcases elaborate patterning, especially in the sinuous motifs that shape the feathers of the peacock. This intricacy of detail is contrasted by the firm, flat style of Kenojuak's owl.
A close look at the drawing reveals the assured hand with which she outlined the owl. Using black, blue, and red felt-tip pens, she filled in those contours with long, fluid, clearly distinguishable strokes. Their direction seems intentional in showing the flow of those individual feathers of the owl. The suppleness of the marker tip is matched by the absorbency of the paper to which it's applied. As the ink seeped into that paper, it created a halo effect, which was in keeping with the kind of softness of the body of that owl. Irregularities in the drawing enliven it, such as the unmatched delineation of the amusing eyes. I find her exuberance and boldness very bewitching.
The adjectives bold and exuberant are equally applicable to Jangarh's painting. Although he employed a range of dotted patterns in his work, the fragmented wave pattern, essentially radiating rows of parabolic arcs composed of dots, was one that he favored often. Here it is used to wonderful effect, as if reflecting the billowing of the bird's wings or the rippling of the feathers as the peacock begins to fan them out. This, coupled with the use of vivid, bright colors, brings a striking force and energy to the work.
There are more than 100 prints and many drawings of owls by Kenojuak, most of them featuring the regal spray of feathers that surround the head, most famously the enchanted owl of 1960, a stone cut that appeared on Canadian stamps. But owls are featured in the work of many Canadian artists due to their significance both culturally and spiritually within the community. There are many legends surrounding the owl across the various Arctic groups, including a creation story where the owl is associated with light. When Kenojuak described her practice in 1978, she compared herself to an owl, saying, "There is no word for art. We say it is to transfer something from the real to the unreal. I am an owl. I am a happy owl. I like to make people happy and everything happy. I am the light of happiness. And I am a dancing owl."
Similarly, peacocks are abundantly present in Indian art and mythology, but they also frequently appear in the works of Pardhan artists due to the local cultural significance they carry. A famous Pardhan Gondi myth surrounding the peacock, for instance, is a creation fable that varies in the telling but attempts to explain the disproportionate appearance of the bird's feet, which are considered unattractive, to the rest of its body. As an iconic motif, the peacock occurs repeatedly in a number of contexts in Jangarh's works. For instance, in another ink drawing made in 1998, also in Map's collection, a dancing peacock is visualized as Shiva's trident, with the three prongs formed by the wings and the elongated neck or head of the bird. On the one hand, this is Jangarh playing with form. On the other, it is also his approach to art that does not distinguish between the real and the imaginary, the natural world and the poetic myths of his childhood. It is also why his art was so transformational. Unlike several other Indian folk and tribal traditions, such as Varli or Madhubani painting, he didn't have a pre-existing collective visual tradition to draw upon. His pictorial world was therefore unprecedented and brought to life characters that the Pardhans may have sung about for eons but had never visualized.
When Kenojuak made the enchanted owl in 1960 and the magical owl in 1968, Drawing and printing were relatively new practices in her community of Kingite. She had grown up in a traditional lifestyle of nomadic hunting, and even when she first began making prints and drawings, she was still living a semi-nomadic life with her husband and children. The Inuit had long made stone and ivory carvings to pass along the stories of their nomadic life, of the past and the present. But in the mid-1950s, the Canadian artist James Houston came to Kingite and set up a studio, encouraging the Inuit to make works of art on paper, recognizing there would be an audience for them in the South. By 1959, the West Baffin Eskimo Cooperative had been established, and Kenojuak's work was part of its annual collections from the very beginning. This source of income became important to her, especially after her husband died, and she was always very proud that she could support her family and her community through her art. She became the first internationally recognized Inuit artist, exhibiting globally and working until her death in 2013.
In a near parallel, the man who was key to bringing Jangarh into the urban context and to the notice of the larger art world was J. Swaminathan. The latter was instrumental to the establishment of the multi-art complex Bharat Bhavan in Bhopal, where he drove a strong focus on tribal art. Through his interventions, Jangarh was brought to Bhopal and introduced to never-before-seen mediums, from acrylic and poster paints to printmaking, all of which he revelled in, embraced, and rather quickly mastered. He is famously known for remarking, "The first time I dipped my brush in bright poster colors in Bhopal, tremors went through my body." Jangarh's popularity soon spread beyond Madhya Pradesh to draw both national and international interest. Tragically, however, his genius and ascending stardom in the art world was short-lived. At the time of his death, he was only 39. His work, however, lives on and continues to inspire newer generations of Pardhan artists.
These archetypal birds, the peacock and the owl, are linked not only by the vibrancy and whimsy that underline their depiction, but also by the similarities in the lives and minds of their creators, who both managed to forge unconventional paths and to build lasting legacies.
And finally, a word from our patrons whose support and guidance have been integral to MAP's journey.
While traveling through Europe, I've always wondered how beautiful their museums are. And I've also double wondered why India doesn't have such beautiful museums, despite having such a rich heritage and culture. So when Prashant introduced me to Abhishek and he shared a vision, a grand vision for MAP in India, and that too in Bangalore, I was extremely excited. Museums have this, wonderful way of making our culture and heritage permanent. And what better than having a museum right in Bangalore to make our art, culture and heritage permanent. Over the last 1 year, MAP has shown significant progress. The site is right behind me where I live, and I've seen the site from having nothing at all to having a huge structure already in place in the last 1 year, ever since I got associated. So I think, MAP and the team associated with MAP has done a wonderful job despite COVID and all the challenges it has brought. I wish the team at MAP the very best to come up with a world-class museum that all of us will be proud of, and I hope it makes a big mark on the map of India.
At Foundation, we always believed museums are extremely important to represent the culture of the country. If you want to know the index of any country, the good museums indicate that. In our country, we have 5,000 years history, and so much of so much of history has happened, and so many objects we can get. But we require great museums, and number of museums should be more in our country. In this direction, we thought of helping MAP Museum for Arts and Photography. Not only we should build museum and support museum, we should also make awareness in the common people, because people will not be aware of what is museum, why it is so useful, how it makes you deep rooted to your culture. And by looking at the object, you realize that how our ancestors lived. Looking at the photographs, you realize how photographs have evolved. They are the real witness over a time, tested time. Hence, I request all of you take advantage of this museum. And also, knowledge should be free. So, Infosys Foundation has supported for a free gallery. Use it. Also, be aware of our culture and also teach others awareness about history, culture and music.